Well, hello and welcome to another of the Talk Wildlife Skype interviews. Today I've got with me somebody that may be familiar with you from various TV programmes, probably a self-confessed fishaholic. This is Jack Perks. Hiya Jack, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How about you, Alan?
Good, yeah, I'm very good, thank you. What I wanted to talk to you today about, Jack, was, obviously people will be aware of your book, I'm sure, full of not only fantastic photographs, brilliant photographs, but also facts. If you want to know anything about freshwater fishes in Britain, that's the book to go to. It's an excellent book. So congratulations on that, because it's a really good book. Really enjoy it. But what I want to talk to you about, I want to talk to you about you and your interests, and how you got into sort of doing this type of photography. And also then maybe talk through a few of your pictures and some of the techniques you've used, because I know some of the techniques are not what you would normally, I certainly wouldn't think, oh, I'm going to go into some wildlife photography, I'll take with me a wide angle lens. But there, I've got no imagination. So what we'll do is we'll talk a bit about you first, then we'll talk a bit about your photographs, and I promise it will be about more than fish.
Good.
Because you have told me that you've got another passion, which is reptiles and amphibians as well. So yeah, we'll look at them as well. And there's even a mammal picture I've thrown in, but for two reasons. Number one, because it's a mammal picture, but number two is I need some explanation of what happened next. But we'll come to that. So because it's going to be very visual, I'm going to share screen straight away because I want to get through as many of your pictures as possible. And I can highly recommend your website. There's some brilliant portfolios on there, some brilliant pictures. And also you can access the podcasts on there, which are worth listening to. There's some good podcasts on there as well. So I'll share screen and we'll go for it.
Okay.
Okay, but we'll while I'm sharing screen, we'll just talk a little bit about you. So how did you get into, first of all, fish? Fish is not something that you normally start with. Normally people go birds, butterflies, dragonflies, and then other. So how did you get into fish in particular?
Well, I've always been interested in wildlife and nature, and fish kind of came about because I used to be a keen angler. I still fish a little bit now, but nowhere near as much as I used to. So I had that interest in the different species and where to find them and whatnot. And photography came a little bit later. And I did a degree in marine and natural history photography in Falmouth in Cornwall. So I did a lot of marine and underwater stuff there. But then I moved back to Nottingham. And obviously Nottingham's not famed for its coastline. So I thought, well, I want to keep taking pictures underwater, but I can't go to the sea. So I thought, well, there's a lot of rivers locally, so let's do that. And that's what led me on to doing the freshwater fish, was partly a necessity because that's all I had locally, but I did have that past interest, but also so few people had done it before, really. I'm certainly not the first person to do it, but I'm probably the first person to go in depth with so many different species and really get my teeth into them. And it was just a rabbit hole that spiraled and spiraled into some kind of madness, I think.
I think, yeah, you can't help but be driven towards madness if you're into wildlife, but it's a good madness.
Yeah, no, I don't mind it.
So what I'm going to do with your first four pictures, I'm just going to sort of very slowly click through them and then come back to the beginning, just so that people get an idea of the style of photographs, because they're quite diverse in what you've got here. Anything from something like that, which is almost like a profile, to something like that, which shows a little bit more depth of field, to something like that, which shows the habitat very nicely, then back to the first one, which actually gives a hint at the habitat as well. So if you can talk us, first of all, through sort of these particular pictures, so, how you got them, what types of lenses you use, how would you go about saying, right, okay, well, I want to get, this is an eel, it's not just going to sit there and wait for you. So how do you go about thinking, first of all, this is the subject I want, and this is how I'm going to do it? How did you get that picture?
So this is a river near my house, and a lady who I know who walks a dog rang me up saying there's a snake in the river. And I thought, oh, brilliant, I'd love to try and get a picture of that. So expecting to find a grass snake, and turned up and it was this whopping great eel. And we don't get many, eels are declined massively in the last 50 years, 95%, and they're critically endangered. So to see an eel was fantastic. And big eels have a bit of swagger about them. They just don't seem too bothered because not that much. I mean, apart from otters and maybe a heron, they don't have that many predators. So big eels tend to kind of flaunt themselves a little bit. So got in the river, approached it, and it was in really shallow water. It was in a few inches. And originally I was like, oh, this is a pain. I can't get my housing under. I can't get the camera under the water. And I thought, well, actually, quite like this. And you can see the water droplets on the top of that image. I thought, oh, it kind of works. So as a split level shot. So got a few of those as the eel came towards me. Then it kind of slinked off into deeper water. So I only probably spent a couple of minutes with that eel. But I was just shooting away as much as I could because these are the encounters as a photographer you live for. And I can honestly say I've not had an encounter like that since.
But looking at that picture, I mean, it's got that split screen, which is amazing. But how did you work out what, your aperture needed to be, what your shutter speed needed to be? And how do you work that out when, how do you work that out? I just can't.
Well, I guess, because I do it as a living and I take pictures so often, it's second nature now. I mean, I've been doing photography professionally for 8 years, but I mean, I've been doing it, I don't know, 15 years now. So I shoot completely manual. I don't shoot auto. So I'm moving the settings myself, and it's just like breathing. I look at that and I know what I need to do. So, all right, okay, looking at that image, I want to make sure the eel's in focus. It was a bit slap bang wallop. I mean, as a picky photographer, I would have liked more of that top to be in focus, but the eel isn't going to hang around and let me do that. So that's probably on something like an f6 aperture, when really you'd want f8, f11, something like that. But couldn't do that at the time. I think the image still works. I don't think it particularly detracts from it. But yeah, you just have to do what you can when it's available. So with underwater, you are better off having a smaller aperture, just so more of it's in focus if you can help it.
Yeah, because incredible shot. And then equally, you look at something like that and you think, right, okay, so yeah, how have you done that? So how have you done that? I mean, that's an incredible sort of profile picture. And how have you done that? Because it's amazing that.
Thanks. So it probably surprises people that I do a lot of aquarium photography, because I think, well, if you do underwater, why would you take pictures of animals in aquariums? But it offers you opportunities that would be either impossible or incredibly impractical in the wild. So my shed, which we can't see from where we are, I'm in the conservatory at the minute, but I've got 3 big aquariums set up in my shed, and I put animals into those aquariums and take pictures of them. And what it means is, say, for example, we kind of forget that last winter we had terrible floods, really, really bad. I mean, from September till March, it didn't stop raining. So I wasn't able to do any underwater photography for 6 months nearly. But I could do tank photography. So it means that I can keep busy when I can't do the natural stuff.
Yeah.
But for the smaller subjects, for things like sticklebacks, this is a male free-spine stickleback, beautiful breeding colours, but it's only a couple of inches long. You try finding a 2-inch fish with macro underwater in a river. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. But if I can put it into a fish tank, it's a lot easier. And the fish isn't harmed. I can do this on location if I need to, if the animal's particularly sensitive, or I can bring them back home, photograph them, and then release them back where I found them afterwards, none the worse for wear.
Yeah, so you say that obviously doing that in a stream would be really difficult. However, that picture might be taken in an aquarium, but I still cannot work out how you got it. I mean, it's because does your camera go in the water with it, or are you on the outside?
No. So this is shooting through glass. The stickleback is close to the glass. I'm close to the glass. So there's no reflections there. This was actually taken using natural light. So this is just a tank outside, as opposed to using a flashlight or anything like that. Yeah. That's how it's kind of lit quite nice and evenly. And that's how I did that shot. Just a macro lens, tripod, close up to a fish tank. I mean, you can buy a 20 quid glass fish tank from Wilco's or something like that, and you can have a go at this yourself. And my advice would be, tank photography is difficult. It's hard to do. To make it look good, anyone can bung an animal in a tank and photograph it, but to make it look natural is really hard. Like, I would say that most people would probably not guess that was done in a tank, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make you think it's not. I'm not trying to lie and cheat, a little bit maybe, but I'm quite happy to admit if it's done in a tank. But yeah, I don't want it to be obvious, and I think making it look good is difficult. It's very tricky.
Yeah, and it's because again, throwing that background out of focus like you have there, it does bring the fish out, and because you've got a green hint in the background, it could very easily be mistaken for something that was taken, actually outdoors. So
yeah, that's the idea. Hopefully.
yeah, it works. It's really good. I mean, the thing is, your book stands out so well. If your book is front on in a shop, so if you go to, well, I mean, I work at Penstock and we've got it on our shelf there, and it's front on, and also it was front on. I think it was at Clyde. It was one of the reserves.
Clyde have it as well, yeah.
Yeah, and you go in and you sit and you look at the shelf. That picture stands out a mile, because that's the one that's on the front of your book, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and it stands out a mile. It's just an amazing picture, and it's the colours in it are just stunning.
Well, that's why I kind of chose it for the front cover, because one, it's colourful, it catches your attention, but also, a book about freshwater fish, you would expect something like a salmon or a pike or something like that, and I thought, no, I want to champion the little guys. I want the stickleback, because I think whether you're an angler, whether you're a wildlife enthusiast, a lot of us started with sticklebacks in a tiddler net and a jam jar, and it's just sort of those kind of memories of childhood, and that's made me think, stickleback's a good choice. So
absolutely is. And then we go into this one, which gives a little bit more the feel of sort of its surroundings, its habitat, which is again, it's sort of almost a different picture again. So talk us through this one. Where did you get this one?
This is a brown trout. This is on a river in Lincolnshire. And I've been wanting to do, well, this is quite an old picture, but this was when I was first starting out, and I've been wanting to get brown trout pictures, but there aren't really any places near me that are full of them. But there was this one river that had a few of them. So this is doing it remotely. So the camera is in a housing, and that housing is in the river. And in the old days, what I used to do is leave the camera on an interval shutter. So I just let it go off every 2 seconds. It would take a picture, and eventually the fish would go by. But the trouble with that is it's so pot luck. So what I do now is I actually have a cable running from the housing, and I can trigger it from my laptop as a fish goes by in real time. So it's a lot easier now. But in the old days, how I did it was just put it on an interval timer and just hope that the fish went by, which it did. But it didn't always. I ended up with 2,000 pictures of ranunculus and maybe 4 pictures of brown trout.
Yeah. So that brings me to, if you look at sort of where the foliage is there, and you've got sort of that contrasting sort of light and shadow, how have you allowed for that beforehand, and how have you allowed for the fact that the light might change? So because that photograph, if that was outside of the water, that would still be a great, really nicely exposed picture. The fish would be dead, but so how have you allowed for that light in that area, and allowed for the fact that the light might change before the fish comes along?
I mean, I'm shooting on RAW, so as long as the image is relatively well exposed, you've got plenty of wriggle room. So for those who maybe don't know what a RAW file is, it's basically a digital negative. So it means if it's a little bit too dark, I can pull it back. If it's a little bit too light, I can pull it back. So everything's shot in RAW. I try and expose, obviously, correctly if I can. Again, with doing it like I did when I took this picture on an interval, I've got no control. If it's on manual, you just have to stick with the settings you're on. You can put it on aperture priority, and then that will change the settings. But then you run the risk of getting too slow a shutter speed and the trout being out of focus. So there's so many variables that can go wrong, which is why the way I do it now with a remote trigger, I can change all that in the laptop is so much easier, and the results are so much better now.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Thanks for that. That's again amazing. And this, I mean, before we started, I said every fourth one is sort of my favourite in that group. I love this. Was this you sitting outside of the water with the camera in, or were you in the water with this one?
So I was scuba diving for this one. So I guess what you've done quite nicely, Alan, is shown off all the different techniques that I do. Sometimes I'm just standing in the river with my wellies. Sometimes it's a little fish in a tank. Sometimes it's remote camera traps, and sometimes I'll scuba dive. So this is I think this was Stony Cove, or it might be Dost Hill. I can't remember, but it's one of the Midland dive sites anyway that are full of big pike. And this pike was sitting in the weeds. I don't think it was spawning. The pike do spawn in the weeds there, but it was just sat there. And what amazed me is how well they blend in. You see pike with these mottled colorations and the green, And when they're dug in there, you can't see them. You can understand how they just dart out and grab a roach or a perch or something. So I wanted to try and get below it to show the surface off, because it's the sort of shot you see in the sea a lot, but you don't see it in freshwater as much. In fact, in photography terms, what you call that bit up there is called Schnell's window. That's that effect of the kind of the light coming through the surface.
Right.
But yeah, I wanted to try and get below the pipe, but I couldn't get as low as I wanted because it was already on the bottom. But I got as close as I could, and the pipe wasn't bothered at all. I mean, with a fisheye lens, because all these shots, apart from the stickleback, are done on a fisheye. I'm only a few inches away from that pike. It looks like I'm not that close, but I'm right on it, and the pike's not bothered at all. I guess because in those dive sites, they're used to scuba divers. They're just, they take it in their stride.
Yeah, and also because he's got bigger teeth than you have.
He did have more teeth than me as well.
Yeah, it's a stunning picture. And what I really, really loved about this picture when I saw it was that, yeah, you've got that subject in the sort of bottom third of the photograph, and you've got the light in the top, but it's also how it actually draws you in, where you've got that sort of the foliage going away from you and out of focus a bit and a little bit darker. That it really draws you in. It's as if you're almost in there with the fish. I really, really like that photograph. It's really good.
Thank you. Cheers. Yeah, no, it was a nice shot. I mean, because pike are quite a popular subject in these dive sites, so trying to do something a little bit different or just change it up is potentially quite tricky. But I was pleased with that shot.
Excellent. And now we're still underwater, but we move and we change subject. So we've got some birds coming up. And again, I'm just going to flick through the four first, and then we'll come back and talk about each one. So, again, you've got fully submerged, you've got half submerged. Everybody loves a mallard.
Yeah, who doesn't?
And that one is outstanding. The movement in that, and we'll come back to it because I'm not supposed to be diverting myself off on a tangent. So birds, I mean, they're tricky enough above the water, so to get them underwater is amazing. How would you manage this one? Are you actually, again, are you in the water, or is the camera in the water?
So the camera
certainly won't be in a tank in your shed.
No, I'd need a very big tank for some eiders, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
I love eiders. They're one of my favourite birds. I just think they're phenomenal looking. I love the call that they make. I just think they are incredible. And I normally go to sea houses every Easter. I haven't this year for obvious reasons, but I normally go up there and I spend time photographing the eiders. And I wanted to get underwater shots for a long time. And I don't know if you've been to sea houses before, or yeah. So anyone that's been to the farms will probably been to sea houses first, but the eiders in the harbour there are incredibly tame, really, really tame. They come close to you, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to try and get some underwater shots of them? But they were quite spooky, I guess, because they're not used to people being in the water with them. They didn't like it, so it took a while to get them close. But eventually, I was able to put the camera in the water, and I was chucking out bits of prawn and shellfish to get them close in. So I fed a lot of bread. I didn't want to give them bread really, so if I give them a bit of shellfish, they'll love that. And they came in and eventually got them to get some shots in front of the camera. And again, this is on the interval timer, so completely pot luck. And I was just lucky that a female and a male came by, and that the male is looking at the camera as well. So that could have gone several ways, but I was really, really happy with that shot.
It's really good, and as well that the way the bubbles are playing with within the water and within the feathers of the bird as well. You can see sort of on the male and on the female how the bubbles are clinging on. It's a really nice shot. I really like it.
It's what amazes me with. I mean, you'll know this working at Pensford, but how buoyant these diving ducks are. Like I always, they really struggle to stay under. As soon as they stop kicking, they're straight back up to the top.
Yeah,
and that amazed me. I didn't realise they work like that.
Yeah, it makes you think of how hard they must work to stay under there in the first place.
Oh yeah, the legs are constantly kick.
Yeah. And then we've got it's a common subject, and I think it's even been a winner of the Bird Photographer of the Year a few years ago, and it's always in there and always does well. But a different angle on a mute swan, and a male mute swan. So clearly you weren't under the water here, but how close were you, and what kind of lens was you using for this one?
So I think more or less all the underwater shots are done with the same lens, which is a 10-17 Tachyna fisheye. Brilliant lens. Highly recommend it. And I wanted to get an over/under of a swan. Like you say, I'm certainly not the first person to do it, but I've seen other people do these kind of shots. And this is another early shot from my career. And what I don't know if you noticed in the background, to the left of that swan, there's a black swan. And that's what I actually wanted.
Ah, right, that's what it is.
But this mute male, he wouldn't let the black swan anywhere near me. So he kept coming in close to take the bird seed. So I couldn't actually get what I wanted. But in the end, again, a kind of accident, I was able to get this shot. And I guess the recurring theme on a few of these shots, a lot of these aren't planned. It just sort of happens. But it's also having that knowledge, that experience, and the technical know-how to make the most of a situation. But I was pretty pleased that I'm literally a few inches from that swan, very, very close. I tell you, I mean, I've been diving with sharks. I've been, with venomous snakes, but swans scare the hell out of me. Like, this thing was gearing up. They make a noise like a chainsaw, don't they, mute swans? I don't know how to describe it. It's like, and I just thought, I don't want to mess with this thing. But it was all right with me, but I've got a healthy respect for swans.
Yeah, and it's needed as well. Yeah, I didn't realise that there was a black swan in the background. I hadn't really I basically just thought it was a piece of foliage.
Yeah, it's not obvious, to be fair.
Yeah. So again, looking at this, you've got this sort of swan pretty much in the foreground. You've got to expose for the water underneath, and you've got to expose for the sort of the sky above and the trees. So how did you go about doing that? Had you set that up beforehand, or how did you test that for the light?
So because this was a relatively dull day, an overcast day, the whites of the swan are not too badly overexposed, but it does mean that the water is a bit darker. So often with these kind of shots, you want a bit of sunlight to lighten up the water, but the trouble with that is then the swan would be overexposed. So there's two options there. Again, you've got the shooting in RAW helps, but you can also bracket. So that's where you take one shot a little bit darker, you take one shot a little bit lighter, and then you combine them in Photoshop or whatever you're editing your images with, and that can help with the exposure. So again, there is some editing. I don't edit my images heavily, but I have pulled out the darks below and I've reined in the whites above in post-processing.
Yeah, I'd sort of parked a question in the back of my mind for sort of as we went forward. I might as well ask you now, since you've mentioned it. What percentage would you say of your pictures, or what percentage of your time on your pictures is spent sort of actually on Photoshop or the equivalent, doing the editing? And how often do you get a shot that you think that's perfect as it is, I don't need to do anything with it?
So I can't stand being on the laptop too long editing. I'd rather pull my teeth out. It's just, I'm not that kind of person. So I will edit very, very quickly, very basic editing. I don't normally spend more than a couple of minutes on a picture, which might surprise some people, but it's literally just load it up, sort out the exposure, have a go on the contrast or whatever's needed. If it's too noisy, decrease that. If it needs a bit of sharpening, do that. And then if there's little bits in the picture, I might clone, dust marks out or water particles or something like that. But yeah, I'm not spending more than a couple of minutes on it. If I spend more than 10 minutes, then that's really unusual for me. Whereas I know some people who spend hours and hours on an image, and I just think life's too short. I don't want to be spending hours. I mean, I know it's my job, but I don't want to spend hours on images. So yeah, I just edit very, very quickly, very, very briefly. And as you say, sometimes I'll take a picture and it doesn't need anything. Not very often. There's normally something that needs tweaking. But every now and again, I'll be like, oh, that's okay as is, and that'll be it. Yeah,
right. Thanks for that. Again, like I said, everybody loves a mallard. Again, you can see the sort of sheen of how the bubbles are playing with the feathers here.
Yeah.
This is a cracking shot. What I particularly like as well is that you've got the sort of reflection in the top end of the water, which is really good. So again, was this one that you were in the water with?
This was was I in the water for this one, or was this remote? This was remote, actually. I wasn't. Again, like, it's weird. Mallards are really, really spooky. For some reason in the water, you can go to somewhere where mallards are really tame and they'll eat out your hand on the land, but you put your foot in the water and they freak out. They don't like it. And I just assume it's just something they're not used to, so they're wary of it. It's something I'd love to do at Pensthorpe, actually. I'd love to come and try and photograph some of the birds underwater there. I don't know what the clarity's like in the lakes, but it'd be good to do that at some point. But I had to go with this one, say, remotely. And again, interval timer, and then just a bit of pot luck really on this one. The mallard put its head under as it was grabbing something, and then was able to get the shot.
Yeah, yeah. And it's great again because you're seeing the interaction between this sort of the ducks in the background as well. So, and there's also that sort of mysticism. Is that right? Is that a word? If it's not a word, I've just made it up. So we'll store that for future.
No, I think it's a word. We go with mysticism.
Yeah, whenever you look behind, if you and it's any underwater shot that you've taken so far, when you look behind you, you're drawn into what's happening where you can't see anything, if you know what I mean. That it sounds like a ridiculous sentence, but this bit that's on sort of as I'm looking at the right hand side of the picture, where you've got that almost like that gloom, it's almost anything could come out of that at any time. You just I think it really, really works with underwater photography. I really love that. It's great. In fact, I'm saying I really love that. It's great a lot. So that's because I really love a lot of your photographs.
No. Keep giving me praises, Alan. That's good. Well, with underwater photography, I mean, in the UK, you're lucky if you can see more than 5 meters. So you're always going to have that sort of gloom. Like, we just don't get really, really clear water. It's just part of what we have. So, it's not like being in a tropical reef or a rainforest or something like that. So you always have that gloom, really. Even in the clearest of rivers, it's never brilliant. So you just have to make do with it. And that's why with underwater photography, you need to be as close to the subject as possible, because you need to increase the contrast and the sharpness. And the only way you can do that underwater is being close to your subject.
Yeah. Which brings us to this, which is so that I can break with tradition. This is rubbish.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So now then, were you diving with this bird? Did you have your camera on a stick in the water off a boat? You must have been diving, because I can see the underside of the water.
No, I wasn't. So I was in Shetland. I went to Shetland a couple of years ago. Beautiful place, love Shetland. And I went out with a local photographer called Richard Shucksmith. And he's a local diver, and he runs gannet diving tours. So we went out on his rib out to a place called Noss, and he chucks out some dead mackerel, and then these gannets dive down to grab them. And my plan was to get in the water. I was going to snorkel with them, but the gannets were diving right next to the boat, and I felt, well, I might as well just lean over and take pictures that way. So I'm actually leaning over the side of the boat with my camera in the water as Richard bungs in mackerel and stuff, and then I'm just shooting away. So I'm taking a few pictures, I'm reviewing it, I'm adjusting exposure, I'm adjusting things, take a few more pictures and adjusting, and I'm doing it like that. And this shot, I mean, it was the only one I got like this, but I love the trail of bubbles behind it. I was really, really pleased with that, and it just gives you, I guess, a sense of, because gannets are so quick, it's like push in.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets that movement, I suppose, and the speed of them.
Yeah, it is. And again, even when you sort of come through the bubbles to the bird itself, you can actually see how it's sort of spearing through the water, how how the water's sort of streamlining around it, so that it's punctured the water almost. I'm not going to say it's a really great shot. It's
No.
Okay.
Well, what amazed me is that they use their wings to go deeper as well. I assume that gannets just dived and went straight back up, but they'll go further down. They'll swim, with their wings. They'll fly underwater, and that was amazing to watch.
Yeah. I once I was snorkeling in Cala Galdana in Menorca. Now, wherever Cala Galdana, I think it's Menorca. And I was snorkeling there, and it was actually, this particular bird was famous for sort of spooking people that were snorkeling, not on purpose, but because it swam past them. And a shag came past. And again, it was predominantly was using its legs, but it was using its wings as well. But that it literally came within 2 feet past me, frightened the life out of me at first, but then to swim along with a shag underwater was absolutely outstanding. It was an amazing experience.
Oh wow, that's good. Yeah, because they're quite shy. I don't think I've ever seen an underwater picture of a shag in Britain, so that would be quite an unusual sight.
Yeah, well, evidently, because I'd mentioned it to a local afterwards, that this had happened in the cafe on the beach, and he said, yeah, it's that particular bird is quite famous for doing that. Actually, whether it's picked up on the fact that if we're snorkeling, we might be scaring some of the fish out, I don't know, but it was an amazing experience, and I mean, it was quick. It came past me about sort of 2 foot away. It swam in front of me. I must have followed it it felt like sort of a couple of hours, it was so good, but it was probably only about 20 seconds and then it had gone, but it was amazing.
Oh, wow.
And we're now staying underwater, but we're changing the subject again. And I'm going to hazard a guess here that this was taken in a tank.
It was, yes, yeah. See, once you know, you can't unknow it. Like, and I think people will look at my pictures and they'll be like, "Hang on a minute." So I like people to guess, but yeah, I mean, I do have macro stuff for underwater, so some of it is done in ponds and lakes, but often it's done in a tank. So yeah, this was done in a fish tank. I think it's a southern hawker dragonfly larvae, but I might be wrong on that. But I really like the colours in this one. I think the kind of light greens, showcase the sort of habitat that they live in, and shooting portrait as well. We don't, see as many of these kind of images in portraits, nearly always landscape. So that was a conscious choice to do that. I think I'm using milfoil or stonewood or something like that. It was a specific kind of plant because I hate using Canadian pondweed because it's a horrible invasive plant and everyone uses it in fish tanks and you can spot it a mile off. So I wanted to use something native to kind of illustrate this dragonfly larvae. Yeah,
I mean, and it's great because I must stop saying great, but anyway, they are all great. Again, what you're seeing here is sort of a subject you don't very often see in its sort of larval state in, the water, which is great because, what a lot of people don't realize, see dragonflies whizzing around and they don't realize that that's the adult's period of its life is actually its shortest. It spends most of its time, can spend up to 2 years, sometimes a little bit longer, under the water. So to actually put it in its environment that it spends most of its time in is not great. It's splendid.
Yeah, no, they're only adults for a few weeks, aren't they, or less sometimes? So they're spending more time like this, skulking away in ponds, and you definitely wouldn't want to be a tadpole in a pond because they're just voracious predators. I mean, I think dragonfly larvae were the inspiration for the Alien movies as well. That second jaw that comes out the alien's mouth was taken from dragonfly larvae, so they are quite alien-looking creatures.
Yeah, and well, I'm not going to say it, but I really like that one. I'm not going to guess on this one. I'm going to let you tell us how you got this picture.
Yeah, so it is another tank shot again. It's a great diving beetle at the surface. So you can obviously see the cling film of the water at the top there. So again, something you could do in the wild, but would be fairly tricky. So that was just a way. And these are great subjects again. Like there's so many large invertebrates in Britain's ponds and lakes and things, much bigger than on average than what they get on land. So there's some real monsters. So if anyone's want to go pond dipping and find something unusual, then it's great. I mean, I think Penthorpe's got quite a good pond dipping platform, haven't you? If I seem to remember, last time I went, they had like a little bit for the kids, don't you?
Yeah. How long ago were you there?
I was at the bird fair there last year, I think.
Right. Yeah. That's so the pond that you saw there. That's our sort of new purpose-built pond. So yeah, it is a good one. So you can get sort of quite close over the water in quite a few different places, and there's some nice sort of foliage behind it. So yeah, it would be a good area for photographs. The substrate's not brilliant though, so it does get quite cloudy.
Yes, yeah. I guess people are pond dipping all the time, aren't they? So it's going to be disturbed a fair bit. But with shots like this, it's a relatively not plain. I'm trying to think the right word to describe it. Like it shows you what the animal is. But I guess for identification, this is a good shot for that. You can clearly see that's a great diving beetle. You can see the legs, you can see the head, the colours and whatnot. So I quite like taking these sort of shots as well, where they're maybe not as exciting as some of the others, but they showcase the animal. And often these sort of boring shots, if I want to be kind of really self-deprecating, are the ones that sell better, because it's the kind of thing that a magazine's going to use to show it off. They're not going to use something too arty because it's not clear what the animal is. So it is weird that I often find some of my more plain shots sell pretty well, whereas some of the more arty-farty ones, they might do well on Instagram or Facebook or something, but they don't actually sell that much.
Yeah. And what I like about the last two, is the fact that you're seeing things that you don't actually normally get to see this well. You know, I mean, these things live underwater, and they if you pond it, they're not in the natural environment because you put them in a plastic container. But to see them in the natural environment like that, very, very sort of few opportunities to see a picture like that. So that's what I like about it. It's really good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you don't normally. Yeah, it's an unusual angle to see a great diamond beetle. I mean, if you're lucky, you might see one scurrying away in the pond at night or something. But I say it's really easy to do. Anyone can set up a little tank by their pond and have a go at it.
Yeah. I'm contemplating.
Yeah.
So, but again, if you think about sort of things like, you can go to aquariums, and in aquariums you might see some inverts in tanks, but it's rare that you'll see something, that's like a freshwater invert that'll be in a tank. So, that's why, pictures like this really sort of, you're seeing something that, you look at that and you think, well, all right, yeah, look at that leg there, and look at how it's holding itself. Well, maybe not everybody's doing that, but I'm a bit of a geek like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, you don't. I never really thought about that, but you don't see freshwater inverts in collections very often, do you?
No, it's you can go and see sort of, if you go to Blue Planet or whatever they're called, you can go and see things like lobsters and crab. Well, speaking of devil, and crabs and things like that. But to actually see something like a dragonfly nymph or a diving beetle, or I know that you've also, unless I don't know, you haven't dreamt it, you've got a water stick insect as well, haven't you, on your website?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I've got some in my garden pond actually.
Yeah, so again, to see something like that at that angle, at that, it's in its environment, that's it's quite tricky, because you either have to sort of see it from above in the water and you're looking at it, or you put it in a plastic container and you look at it. So, to actually get a photograph where you can see it in its environment is cracking. And, the same with this, all right, yeah, you could see sort of crabs in an aquarium, but, that is really showing off its environment to the full by doing that split screen there.
Yeah, this is when I lived in Falmouth in Cornwall, and I did a 2-month project on rock pools. So down there, I regret not doing more rock pooling, because obviously it's something that we don't get in Notts, and there aren't any rock pools anywhere near me. So I wish I'd done a little bit more of it now. But they're so biodiverse. There's so many species in Cornish rock pools. It's unreal. And just having a route around the seaweed, you'll find, this is an edible crab, but you'll find all kinds of different crabs and blennies and starfish and all kinds of things like that. And they're obviously scurrying around. So yeah, that was great to do. And yeah, I miss rock pooling quite a bit, but I was really happy to get that shot though. Lovely, yeah, really nice shot.
Yeah. I interviewed Heather Buttifant, who wrote the book Rock Pool.
Know the name, yes.
Yeah, I had to do it twice, because the first time I just got completely distracted by rock pooling as a whole, and the one thing that I wanted to talk about was sea squirts, and we never got to that, so I had to do another one on that. So that's quite an interesting video for you to watch, actually. Maybe you could get in touch with her and go down and spend a few days with her. Also, I did one about blennies, which it's in the library. That's due to go up shortly. And again, there's some really good photography in them. So
yeah, I do like blennies. Got a soft spot for them.
You'll have to watch this this video. It's a video just predominantly about blennies. I mean, like 90% about blennies, but it's
I'll give that a watch.
Yeah, it's really interesting project. So, and then we've got this now. We've come above the water again, but we came above the water because, I mean, I love my inverts anyway, and I love this. This is one of the jumping spiders, and what I really like about it is basically that these things are not that easy to photograph anyway, but you've captured it. You're showing everything that's good about it. You can see their eyes, you can see how it's camouflaged, and everything else is just doesn't matter. Let's get rid of that. This is what we're concentrating on. So this is a really, really nice shot. So how did you do this?
So this is actually in my garden, and I think it just proves that you don't need to go far to find interesting shots. And again, it's quite an old image, but I took it in a log pile, and I was just scurrying around to see what I could find, and I saw this unusual jumping spider. And we spoke before. I don't know the exact species. I guess if anyone knows, get in touch with Allan or me and let me know what kind it is. But I found it. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. And then it was just stuck in this little groove. So I got my macro lens, and the jumping spiders are almost cute. I mean, I think they're cute. I think they're amazing. But I can understand how some people might not like them. But it's those big bulging eyes. And I thought, oh, there's a picture here, and I want to kind of showcase that. And as you said, I want people to just focus on that. I don't want to be distracted elsewhere. So by blurring out everything else and just keeping the attention on the eyes, that's what you're looking at, and that's where the image is really.
Yeah, that is a lovely picture of a spider. I nearly said great then, but I'm trying now to avoid saying great. Right, now then, I did say I'd thrown a mammal one in. And this is sort of for two reasons, but the first question I've got to ask you is what happened next?
So this is in the Farne Islands, and this is a young seal. I know, because a lot of people falsely kept saying, "Oh, it's a leopard seal." I was like, no, it's not. It's not. I've not been to Antarctica. This is Northumberland, and seal pups are incredibly curious. And as you can see by those teeth, it's a young seal because they're all there and they're relatively white, whereas an older seal would have teeth missing and be all yellow and stuff. And remembering that rule from earlier, the closer you are, the better for underwater photography. Not necessarily this close, but close. And this seal pup was coming at me and close, and I was just taking the pictures. And then it actually bit onto my camera. And you can see its top lip is actually pushed against my camera. You can see its lip is on there. So that's how close it was. And half of me was thinking, this is amazing. I'm able to get this unusual view. And the other half, probably shouldn't say what the other half of me was thinking, but you can gather. So I was, oh God. But I absolutely love this shot. It's one of my favourite photos I've ever taken. Technically, there are things wrong with it, but it just as an experience and as a viewpoint, I was really, really chuffed with this image, and it was just bonkers. But it didn't damage the camera. It wasn't being aggressive. It was just being curious, and it swam off and carried on. So I was really, really pleased with that encounter and to get that shot.
Yeah, and you didn't lose a finger or a hand or anything like that?
No, sorry, my dog's trying to get... She's just tapping at the door. I'm just going to let my dog in.
All right, no worries.
Come on, you trouble. Sorry, Alan.
Oh, don't worry.
All right.
Am I guessing right? This is a tank?
It is a tank, yeah. This is a smooth newt male. I mean, smooth newts have got absolutely phenomenal breeding markings and a little bit of a crest. Not as much as a great crested, but a little bit. And I just wanted to show off the belly, but in a natural way. I didn't want to turn it on its back on land because I wouldn't do that normally. I thought, how am I going to see a newt's belly? And I thought, well, if I just put several into a fish tank and just try and get them as they come up for air, I can do it that way. And that's how I was able to get this image and just show that kind of fiery red. But some of them can have it really like blood orange and really, really deep colours. It's a really colourful part. I think it's a defence mechanism. I assume that's why they've got the colours there. But yeah, I was quite happy to get that. And again, in portrait, I thought it's going to look better in portrait than landscape, just because they're kind of more lengthwise. They're that way.
Yeah. This is a great shot. Oh, I should stop saying great, but I can't help myself.
Well, this is an example of why you should have a shallow pond for your tadpoles, because I've got a sloping one, which isn't bad, but in the really shallow parts of the pond, the tadpoles develop quicker, and in the deeper areas, the spawn takes longer. So I had half of my pond with still frog spawn, and half of it where they'd already developed into tadpoles. So I was able to get a kind of different shot by having a tadpole next to frog spawn, which normally you wouldn't, because obviously they hatch into it. So I was able to kind of get a bit of a juxtaposition, and this is about as arty-farty as I get with my photography. But it was, you guessed it was done in a tank, but I was quite happy to kind of get a slightly different viewpoint, but also showcase both tadpole and frog spawn in the same image. Yeah.
It sets it out really nicely, the sort of tadpole against the background. And again, it's showing a species that's, you don't normally, you're not normally able to sort of see it that close and go, right, okay, yeah, so it's got this sort of almost transparent bit down there. And, so again, a sort of common enough species that, lots of people have stuck in buckets, but probably not being able to get that kind of view of it and, have a really good look at it like that. So again, it's just the job.
Tadpoles are gorgeous, and they're so varied in markings, just common frog tadpoles. Some of them are almost green, some of them have speckles of red, and some of them are dark black. I mean, really beautiful. And they're only at tadpoles, isn't it, even before they get to a frog?
Yeah, you're right. Again, this one I liked because it shows it in a habitat. Now, I said, if you notice there, a habitat, because if I say in its habitat, you may say, ah, yeah, but it was done in a tank. So this one, sorry?
This wasn't done in a tank. This one is natural.
Right, good. Yeah, it shows it in its habitat, and that, you know, that again, it's something to see, you know, how it's interacting with its habitat, and again, you know, working out that light beforehand, and how are you going to get that? Because, you know, how did you go about thinking, right, well, you know, this guy's going to turn up there? How did you set that shot up?
So this was in a relatively small pond, actually in a car park. So it was probably only the size of a small dinner table. And I thought, well, let's have a look. It was clear water. There were lots of newts in there. And it was a case of me lying down on my belly on my front with the camera housing in the pond, and then just waiting for a newt to go by. Because they're coming up to get air every so often. So you wait for one to come up, and then as it drops back down into the weeds, that's when I take the pictures. And they wouldn't stay around for long. I guess, you know, predators and whatnot. So you don't have long with them. But this was one as it just going back into those weeds and getting away. I was just kind of lucky that it was coming towards me. So you've got the eye contact and a bit more interest in that way.
Yeah, and what's apparent from a lot of the pictures that you've been talking about that have been taken in their natural environment is that you've got you've really got a good understanding of the behaviour of your subject, which it's important. It's key. I mean, it's not only key when you're just sort of doing a bit of nature watching, but to do photography, you've got to understand their behaviour, and that must play a big role in how you manage to get the pictures you get.
Oh, definitely. I think if you don't have to be David Attenborough or anything, but just knowing a bit about behaviour is going to help you massively, so much. If you know where what habitat that animal likes to live in, what food it likes to live in, is it nocturnal, is it diurnal? You know, how does it react to this other animal? Like, whereabouts in the country is it more abundant in other parts of the country? There's so many things will make a huge difference to your photography. And obviously, if you can predict behaviour, you can then apply that to your photos, and you can get ready for something to happen. So I don't know, for example, with birds, a lot of small birds will poo before they fly, don't they? So if you see the bird poo, you're like, oh, okay, I'll get ready for a flight shot. So just all these little nuances are going to really help your photography and you know, inform you for it. So yeah, a little bit of behaviour goes a long way.
Yeah, and absolutely key. You know, I obviously, you know, I like my nature. I go out. I occasionally take a camera with me, and occasionally take bad photographs. But I'm not about.
They're not that bad.
Yeah, well, I'm not about the photographs. I take some photographs, obviously, but I'm not about the photographs. But I know a lot of people that are coming through now, and I've seen over the last few years that there's been an absolute massive increase in people I see with sort of big cameras and all the rest of it. And I think it's, you know, if there's one thing that they can take away from this video, and that is understand your subject. You know, if you know what your subject is going to do, it's going to make your photography, you know, a lot better and a lot easier. So, you know, that's a really, really good tip for people.
Yeah, definitely.
This is not a great. Again, it's another picture I really like. I can't help myself. This really struck me when I looked on your website. I thought, oh yeah, now that is really, really good. That's the type of picture I would like. You know, I would like to take a picture like that, but probably never will. So again, how did you set it up? How did you make sure that you were getting what you wanted? Did you have an image in your mind? Because clearly you've come across, you know, what's happening in the pond here. Do you then think, right, okay, I'm going to take it so that it's going to look like this, or do you just wing it to an extent?
So this took years of planning, like honestly. So it took so long. So common frogs are definitely a more popular subject now underwater than they used to be. I think when I first started, there weren't many people doing it, and now a lot more people are doing it. This isn't a bad thing. It just means there's more images out there. And I wanted to get this shot. I wanted 2 frogs in amplexus with some frog spawn already there, and some interest above and some interest below. That's the shot that I wanted to do. But each year, either I miss the frogs, because, you know, frogs don't spawn for very long. Like, if you get to the pond, they might be done in a day or 2. So they'd already been and gone, or they hadn't been there yet. The water wasn't right. Sometimes it was too deep. Sometimes it was too murky, like clarity. And after about 4 years of trying, I was ready to give up. And then I got to this pond in the Peak District, weirdly enough, at a place called Froggatt, which wasn't intentional, but it's called Froggatt. And there was this small, shallow, spring-fed pond, so it ticked all the boxes. It was the right depth. It was nice and clear. There's lots of weeds in it, and it had frogs and frog spawns. Like, absolutely fantastic. And I set up a external flash. So this is one of the few images where I'm using flash. Don't have a problem with flash, just don't use it very often. And I wanted that flash to light the bottom because I knew it was a relatively dull day, and I wanted to bring those highlights and those colours out a little bit better. I knew that the frogs wouldn't do it while I was there. So again, I placed the camera half in, half out, and then I'm doing this remotely with my laptop. So this is a more recent image from a couple of years ago, and I'm triggering the photo when the frogs come by. And obviously, when the frogs are confident, there could have been anything up to like 30 or 40 frogs just in that little pond. So I was relatively confident one would come past the camera, and of course, this female and male did eventually, and I was super pleased. So I was really, really happy with that because it's literally years of work to get one image. So I was chuffed to death with that.
Okay, so here's a question for you. How long did it take you to get it? As in from, right, this is what I'm going to do, not the 4 years, but how long did it take you to get that particular shot? And how many of that shot did you take before you arrived at that one?
I mean, it would have been probably a morning in terms of actually turning up, putting the camera in and doing it. So doesn't sound as impressive then, does it? But then I got loads of shots, absolutely loads. And I've got very similar shots to this. I've got other frogs that came into it. But what attracted me to this particular shot was just the way that both frogs have got their heads out of the water, but you can still see under the water, their legs, the patterns. That female's obviously still got spawn in there. You can see how fat she is. There's nothing too distracting above the surface. So that's what arrived on that one. I mean, there's lots of other shots that are similar that I like, but there was just something about that shot that I particularly liked.
Mm. And again, you know, something that enables people like me to look at the behaviour and go, right, yeah, okay, not too closely because that's voyeurism, but you know, to look at the behaviour, but also to look at the difference between the male and the female and the markings, and
yeah,
it's good to have something like that. It's not great at all. It's good to have something like that.
Yeah.
So we're staying in the water, but again, we're changing to reptiles now. And I left reptiles and amphibians till last because you did say to me that they were some of your favourites. Again, this is a really good shot. And if anything, this is, as much as I like the last one, I think this is even better than the last one. Don't quite know why. There's just something about this that
I suppose you don't often see shots like this of grass snakes. As far as I'm aware, I'm probably the only UK photographer that's got a shot like this. And this was, again, another thing where someone rang me up and said there's a snake, but this time it was actually a snake. So this was a lady who lives in South Yorkshire, I think it was, and she has a swimming pond. So this massive pond that she swims in every morning, she just lengths up it, but she also manages it for wildlife. So she's got lots of lilies and newts and frogs and things. And she said that she'd had grass snakes, and I thought, okay, yeah. I turned up to go photograph the newts and the frogs, and sure enough, this grass snake was resting at the side in the lilies. So I went over to try and get some shots of it. And I'm in the water, I'm snorkeling. So all that snake can see is the top of my head. So it can't see the rest of my body. I approached it very slowly, and I was doing a kind of take a picture, move closer, take a picture, move closer. Because grass snakes can be pretty quick. I assume because it's been in the water, it wasn't quite as quick. But it was a warm day, so I mean, it could have shot off whenever it liked. I think it had just shed its skin, or it was just about to shed its skin. So that's another reason why it maybe didn't see me as well. It could smell me, but it couldn't quite see me. But yeah, I was really, really happy to get that because, of course, grass snakes are quite aquatic. People they don't really think of grass snakes of being in the water, but they'll go under the water, they'll hunt under the water. So they spend a lot of their time by ponds and rivers.
Yeah, nice. And we're staying with reptiles, but we're coming out of the water. Again, really, really nice shot from the point of view that it's not just showing the subject. It's showing. It's almost like a landscape type picture. It just happens to have this sort of frog taking up, you know, the bulk of the picture and sort of stealing all the focus. So again, how did you do that? And it certainly wasn't in this country, but no, how did you do it?
It's a gecko. It was a gecko in Rhodes, I think it was, and I found this gecko in my hotel. So I'll put my hands up. I'll put that gecko there. Took it down, took a picture on the beach, put it back. It was you know, he was quite happy after that. Because I had this shot in my mind because we were getting beautiful sunsets each morning, and I thought I want to make use of these sunsets, but I want an animal in the shot as well. And I love geckos. I used to keep geckos as a kid. I used to keep a lot of reptiles as a kid, and I thought, well, I want to try and get. I think this is a Turkish gecko. I might be wrong. I'm not 100% on that, but I was really happy to kind of get that shot. So it's actually really small as well. The picture kind of tricks you with perspective, makes you think it's big. That gecko is probably only 3 or 4 inches long, if that. So it's a very small animal, but I'm very close to it. So yeah, I was really happy with that. I'd actually forgotten I'd taken that photo. So yeah, you reminded me of that. But that was a great shoot. I really enjoyed finding geckos and getting some shots of them.
Yeah, I really liked it because of the difference, you know, because it's not just, well, I'm going out and I need a picture of the gecko and therefore I'm going to get a picture of the gecko, and then forgetting about sort of everything else that's going on around it. So whilst you moved it to that position, you know, it really works because you've got that greater environment. So yeah, I like that. And this one is lovely. I would love, I mean, I've seen them, never as good as that because they're quick.
They are very quick, yeah.
But again, talking about, you know, having a species in its habitat, you know, that couldn't be better sort of pictured than that one. You know, that is in its habitat. So that's again very, very nice shot.
So this is a green lizard in Jersey, and I think it's the only place in the UK where they're native. There are a few non-native populations as well. And in a past life, I used to survey reptiles, and I was out there lifting up tins with the local amphibian and reptile group. So this green lizard was basking under a tin. They lifted the tin up. So what you can't see is there's someone behind me with a tin over my head, and then I got this shot, and then they put the tin back down because, like you say, these lizards are incredibly quick, and it's not very often they're going to let you sit around for a wide angle. So that's how we got this shot, basically. I mean, there are ways you could do that. Again, you could wait around, it'd take ages. But yeah, we were just lifting tins up. I was getting the photos, and they put the tin back down. They didn't need to catch them on that particular day, so they weren't taking any kind of length data or anything like that. They were just trying to get a rough idea of population in that particular area because they're protected in Jersey.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, what lens have you used here? How have you taken this?
So this is with the fisheye again. So it's the same lens I'm using underwater. It's the same lens I used for that gecko. It's just a very close focusing wide lens. So it's a really, really good lens for wide angle wildlife photography. And it's not a particularly expensive lens either. In terms of photography, I think it's about 300 or 400 quid or something like that, which for a lens is not the end of the world. So I'd definitely recommend it. It's a very sharp lens as well.
Yeah. Right, so I know we've talked a lot about your photographs, but I know you're more than just a photographer. If that I don't mean that in any way to sound patronising.
No, I know. No, that's fine.
You are very much sort of into conservation as well. You're a volunteer at sort of wildlife trusts and stuff like that. And there's a whole portfolio of this type of thing on your website, which clearly you've done because it is something that is close to your heart, and you must see a lot of this in the types of photographs that you do. Yeah,
I mean, this image in particular is obviously like focusing on plastic pollution, and yeah, I unfortunately see a hell of a lot of it, which is a real shame. I think we're more awake to it now than we used to be, and I'd like to think people aren't throwing away as much rubbish and microplastics into rivers and stuff, but it still does find its way into there. And I suppose I've got a unique perspective just because I'm more or less got gills the amount of time I spend in rivers, so I do see a hell of a lot of it, and I think you need to get those shots of the animals with the plastic to kind of wake people up a little bit. Like, yeah, they are interacting with the plastic, they're eating it, it's causing a massive problem to the environment, and you need the images to back that up.
And where was this taken?
This was taken in the River Wye in Derbyshire. Right.
Yeah, because a lot of people might still think, oh, well, it's just seeds. Well, it's not. They need to just go on your website and just have a look. It's definitely rivers.
I think it's something like 80% of plastic that is in the sea starts its life in a river.
Yeah.
So that's where it all kind of goes in the first instance.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to you now, he says,
Okay.
hopefully. That was a great insight into both the species and your sort of techniques of how you've taken the photographs. And so thanks ever so much for that. What I'll do is I'll put various links underneath your website, underneath the video, because I know you not only do your photography and your volunteering and all the rest of it, you do talks. So, if anybody wants to sort of book you for a talk, and who knows, somebody might book you to talk about reptiles and amphibians rather than just fish.
Yeah, I do a range of talks. I mean, they're all listed on my website. So, I do. I mean, I did speak at Pensthorpe last year at the bird fair, and I go all over the place for it.
I don't know how we missed one another at the bird fair. That was.
So you would have been there, would you?
I was in the education centre all day talking to families, so I was sort of.
We probably walked past each other, Allan.
Sorry?
We probably walked past each other.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I would have been the one that wasn't looking stressed in the slightest. Nah, I love it, really. Right, Jack, I can highly recommend the book, by the way, and I know you've got a second book out, and just before we do go, the second book, it's not about fish. Well, it's sort of indirectly is. It's about pond life, isn't it?
Well, what I would say is those two books, they're actually out of print now, so there's not much point me plugging them.
Right.
But I have got a third book out next month, and that's called The Complex Lives of Britain's Freshwater Fishes, and that is with a very talented author called Mark Everard. So he wrote the book. I did the photography for most of it, and that is the book about fish to get. I mean, that first book I did is a coffee table book. It's lovely, but this next one is the dogs. It's really good. So
it's the dog fishes.
Yeah, the dog fishes. Yeah. I'll keep it family friendly. I would highly recommend that one. I mean, there are links online. You can pre-order it, but it's The Complex Lives of Britain's Freshwater Fishes. That's going to be a really, really good book. Great.
Well, maybe we'll talk again when the book comes out.
Yeah, happy to.
Great. Thanks for your time, Jack. And
thanks for having me, Allan. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I'll keep my eye on your website, because I've just been introduced to some of your podcasts, so I'll have a look at them as well.
Cheers. All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye now.